Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, and I direct events at the Strand. We are so happy to have everyone here tonight. Before we launch into a discussion of Meredith's book, Brag Better, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, still run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, authors like Meredith and Tiffany, we wouldn't be here today, and we are truly appreciative of it. Tonight, we are excited to have with us Meredith Fineman, who is celebrating the release of her new book, Brag Better. Meredith is an entrepreneur, writer, and media expert with over a decade of experience training individuals to use public relations as a catalyst for positive career change. She is the founder and CEO of FinePoint, a leadership and professional development company with a focus on visibility and voice. She speaks and trains on a number of topics and is best known for speaking and training on women and bragging. Fineman is also the creator and host of the second-hand and sustainable fashion podcast, Never Gets Old. Joining Meredith in conversation is Tiffany Dufu. Tiffany is a catalyst at large in the world of women's leadership and the author of Drop the Ball, a memoir and manifesto that shows women how to cultivate the single skill they really need in order to thrive, the ability to let go. According to Forward contributor Gloria Steinem, Drop the Ball is important, path-breaking, intimate, and brave. Named to Fast Company's League of Extraordinary Women, Tiffany is founder and CEO of The Crew, a peer coaching platform for women looking to accelerate their professional and personal growth. She was a launch team member to Lean In and was Chief Leadership Officer at Levo, one of the fastest growing millennial professional networks. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Meredith and Tiffany to the stage.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much, Sabir. The ladies will take it from here.
And to the Strand. I can't believe we're here at the Strand in our living rooms. I'm a huge fan, longtime shopper and patron and reader of the Strand. So it's really cool to be here with my friend. So
Yes, absolutely. You got that action going with the hand. I am too a big Strand believer and supporter and really appreciate all of you joining in and chiming in. You could probably tell from Sabir's introduction that I care deeply about women and girls. In fact, advancing them is my life's work. And there's nothing that I would rather be doing for the next hour than supporting the advancement of one of the most incredible women that I know, which is Meredith Fineman, and her book, Brag Better. Congratulations, Meredith.
thank you. It's very wild and a
Yeah.
wild time to be releasing a book. And I'm happy that it's here and that people can hold it.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, y'all, I am a writer, but I'm mostly a reader. This is an amazing book. You can see from all the tabs that I've been devouring the book. I've like scribbled all over it. I was just telling Meredith that I can't let anybody borrow it because I've got too many personal comments in the margins. So I've got a ton of questions for Meredith, but the way that this is going to work is that we're going to chat for a little bit. I've got some questions for her, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So you can start to ask questions that we can get to later in the conversation by posting in the Q&A, or you can post them in the chat. We're Zoom veterans here, so you just do whatever works for you, and we'll figure out how to make sure that we can get your questions answered by the end of this hour. I just want to start with the word brag because for many women, given the work that both of us do, we both know that this can sometimes be a dirty word. And the book is funny, y'all. So you have to read the book just to get the humor. In the beginning, you say that when people think of bragging, they often go straight to the idea of throwing themselves a parade. But that is not necessarily what you mean by bragging better. Can you talk to us about what it means to brag better?
Absolutely. So I first started using the word brag in my speaking and coaching and training in 2013, and conceiving of this book and this idea starting then as well. And it's a tricky word. I'm in the business of getting attention. I understand that it is not, it's a word that elicits a lot of feelings, often negative, from people. As a writer of 15 years at this point, we just don't have any other words to describe the act of talking positively about professional accomplishment. So for as many people who said to me that I shouldn't use the word, there kind of wasn't an alternative that I thought really packed a punch and that would get people's attention and make them feel something and maybe pick up this book and think about this skill set. And my argument is that bragging better, stating true facts about your work consistently, cohesively, repeatedly, strategically, is what will help advance you in the workplace, whether that is for an internship, a promotion, a corporate board seat, a TV appearance. Bragging better is absolutely irrespective of level of seniority. And so I hope that this book, especially in such an uncertain time, can help people feel that there is a way to channel their work and be proud of it when there's a lot of hard stuff going on.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that you do that I think is so smart, and I'll say I tried to do this with Drop the Ball too, it's to reappropriate, a term that people often associate with something negative or something that they don't want to do, and really use that as a way to amplify it.
This Tiffany's book that you can also get, Drop the Ball.
Drop the Ball.
I threw a book party for Tiffany many years when she published the book. So she also wrote a book.
She did. So Meredith brags better about a lot of people, not just herself, which we love about her. What makes bragging so difficult? Why is it considered a dirty word? Why is it that women in particular have such a difficult time doing this, Meredith?
So I will say a lot of my work is around women and bragging, but brag better is irrespective of gender, and bragging better in general is irrespective of gender. It's so hard to do for so many reasons. You should not know how to do these things. They come naturally to about 3 people. They are a learned skill set, which is what I'm arguing. I've trained thousands of people at this point in these skill sets, and hopefully many more with the book. But it's so hard for a lot of different reasons. So first, you don't have a vocabulary to talk positively about professional accomplishment. It's crazy that we only have the word brag. I thought about, touting yourself or hyping yourself, but those don't really describe how we want to share our work cohesively, strategically, to get what we want. There's just no vocabulary for that. So I really, really cared that brag better fill that gap, because the other issue we have is we have a couple people screaming, and the rest of us who don't even know how to begin talking about ourselves. And that leads into this idea that I saw, and I still see as someone who is in and around media, who's in and around public relations, we are rewarding the wrong voices. We have this really intense inverse relationship between volume and merit, and we reward loud. And everyone that comes to me, particularly individual clients, we'll talk about the qualified quiet, are people that have done the work. And everyone watching, everyone I've ever spoken, you can think of someone in your industry who has done less than you have, who knows less than you do, who maybe gets more of the accolades or chance.
I don't know anyone like this. I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea what I'm talking about.
And they raise a ton of money.
Yeah. And get, I'll speak it into being that I would love to write the follow-up Brag Better with Money, which is a whole different conversation. But asking for praise and recognition, asking for money are very similar. They're just literally different currencies. So you have those issues. And then particularly for women, you have a whole other set of factors, or basically anyone who is not a white man. So, anyone who is deemed other, which is honestly most of the population. I feel like one reason why I cared so much about this, and one reason why it's so hard, is we just don't have a representative demographic of voices of what we actually look like, and we as in people that exist that are diverse and interesting and have different viewpoints and know their stuff, and there's no one way an expert looks. And I think that it's really important that we get thoughtful, knowledgeable, interesting voices into the mix, whether that is in our media and who we ask as expert sources and articles, who we put on television, who we put on stages. So that's why it's so hard. You don't have the words. For women, you're judged on metrics that men are not. You are, looked at from your voice to your ankles. Positive attributes are associated with passive behaviors, particularly around voice and silence. So, she was coy, she was demure, she was shy. That idea of the direct relationship between being attractive to others and being silent go hand in hand. So that's just a couple of the reasons. It also is just a hard thing to do, and we don't have good examples. We don't have good role models. So it's hard to figure out where to begin.
Well, I have an extraordinary role model called Meredith Fineman that I've been learning from for years. So I definitely have that. One of the things that you're triggering for me is that I was really instilled with this sense of humility as a value, as a virtue, that I should be humble. And so the challenge for me, has been, how do I balance bragging with this virtue that's been drilled into me around humility? And I've really had to turn it around and really say to myself, Tiffany, you're abusing the virtue if your humility stands in the way of you achieving impact in the world, because you can't brag about your work and about what it is that you do to help people live better lives.
So I actually, and I don't know why I only had so much space and time with writing this book, but I did not address the term humble brag, which has sort of been deemed this icky thing that people do when they try to seem humble, but also like, I just don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. I don't think humility and gratitude and pride is not also synonymous with bragging about your work, showing up for yourself, showing up for others. I'm sure we'll talk later in the hour about how much bragging better is a team sport, and doing so for others, on behalf of others, in service of others, is so important. I talk so much about gratitude and pride and humility being part of also bragging. I mean, you're doing yourself a service, you're doing your company, your brand, bosses a service by sharing what you know, not only to better your career, but also better conversations, keep people informed, let people know what you want, especially. So I wrote an extra chapter in quarantine that isn't in the book. It's free on the Brag Better website, brag-better.com, on how to brag better from home and online. It's a very strange time, especially to think about doing these things. It's a painful time. We have two pandemics going on simultaneously, a public health crisis, and our long needed reckoning, with race in America. But I will say it's a strange and hard time. So I think that you owe it to yourself to say what you know, but also, I didn't think about this as much, but writing this book in an election year made it very clear to me that I also believe it's partially civic duty for people who know what they're talking about to share it with others. For so many reasons, we desperately need thoughtful voices in the mix. And that's not going to come from you're putting your head down and doing the work. So as much, we reward loud. That's what happens. I've seen it in media. I've seen it in so many different ways and in many different industries. We can talk about that too. That's what we're saying, this inverse relationship between volume and merit. We got to get the qualified quiet to be louder, because we're not going to get the loud people to all of a sudden stop talking. They're not just going to be like, oh, maybe I should just be quiet.
No, they don't. No, they won't. Can we talk a little bit? You've mentioned so many things that I want to talk about, but before we go on, can you talk about the qualified quiet? You've mentioned that term a few times. I loved the term. It resonated with me for a reason that I'm also going to ask you about, which is personality and all of that. But what is the qualified quiet?
So that's what I call my audience. I define the qualified quiet as people that have done the work but don't know how to talk about it. To some degree, that is all of us. It is a strength and not a weakness. I always want to make that clear. It is so much harder to do the work than it is to figure out how to talk about it. What I'm teaching and training is not rocket science. I believe it's an important cherry on top to the work that you do to propel you forward so that other people can see you and reward you. It's interesting, in the release of this book, I had, you know, thought people would say, oh, I'm part of the qualified quiet, but people are identifying themselves as a qualified quiet. So I've gotten some messages being like, I'm a qualified quiet, which I love. I love that. But that's the term. It's irrespective of gender. It's irrespective of level of seniority. And it is just what I call basically everyone that knows their stuff but is having trouble sharing it.
Yeah. One of the other things that sometimes used to make me think outside of humility that bragging is going to be so hard is that I'm what you refer to as an introvert, despite what you might see on this Zoom. I very much derive my energy from doing this, putting my head in a book all by myself. And, you know, if you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert, like what role does that play in your bragging, your ability to do it?
Not as much as you would think. So I did 20 brand new, interesting interviews of people from Gia Tolentino to Dreamhampton to Claire Saffitz to Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet, that came out in 2012 about the power of introversion. She is the reason why we talk so openly about introversion and extroversion. And she and I spoke for this book about what it means to brag and also be introverted. And it's just, I'm never telling anyone to be a different person. It's about playing to your strengths and then showcasing those strengths in a way that feels true to you. So what I always make clear to clients or to audiences is I'm never telling you to adopt a new personality. I'm never you have things to brag about, like full stop, no matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. Like you can craft it and pitch it and make it feel good. But you know, for people that are introverted, maybe your bragging is introverts are very comfortable expressing themselves in print. Maybe that's where it's going to come from you, whether it's articles or posting or one-on-one conversations where you thrive. I don't think that they're as intertwined as you might think. A lot of people, when they think about bragging, is this idea of shouting from the rooftops, which if that's what it is for you, that's great. But really, it's just getting really strategic about your wins so that you can show other people so you could advance your career. And if that can take any form that works for you. It's interesting because in some of the interviews that I've done in the past, I guess it's only been like 2.5 weeks, which is crazy. You know, some of them I've described brags. People go, well, that's just asking for something. I was like, well, someone's asking for something. It's someone else's like biggest brag ever. You can sort of start anywhere, whether that's just like raising your hand in a Zoom meeting, or that is, you know, crushing the TED stage. It really depends on the person.
It sure does. And there are many ways. I'm glad you started getting into the technical details of this because there are many ways that bragging can manifest in terms of platforms. And so part of the reason why I really recommend this book is because it's very practical. So there's, you know, the theory of bragging and the psychology around bragging, but there's also like, what do I do with my LinkedIn profile bragging? So can you talk about like how you brag in your resume, in your bio, in your headshot? Can you help us with all the things that we're using to amplify ourselves right now in a very practical way?
Yeah, let's talk about what you can do like today, tomorrow, this week. So I cared a lot that this book so I've spent 10 years refining these tactics, coming up with case studies and research. I really care that, yes, I care that you, the reader, the, you know, viewer, feel that your accomplishments are worth talking about. That is the main takeaway here, is like, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, your accomplishments are worth sharing. But I cared a lot that the book was not emotion based, because I don't think that works. And when I've read and consumed those sorts of books that just tell me how to feel versus what to do, I actually think they have the opposite effect, and that it makes me more unsure, and I am less willing to take that advice. So let's talk about what you can do today. I mean, I talk about bios constantly, and I'll talk about it again because I always do. So your bio is something people often overlook it. Everyone should have, like, if someone says to you, if I say to you, hi, person that saw me talk at the Strand, please send me your bio. You should have that already. So what does that mean? That means putting in a quarterly calendar reminder and pulling up a Google document or Word document or whatever you use. And you need a long bio to start. I love bios because I don't see them changing. A lot of people sort of poo-poo them as either unnecessary or difficult to do because it's hard to write about yourself. Again, like bragging, it's hard to think about you and what you want to share. It makes people anxious. It's just at the bottom of your list every time, so it's easy to just push to the side. But that is an original bragging spot. And there's a lot, the book is split into sort of 3 acts, and that the first act is why this issue matters. The second act is what to do about it. And the third act is what it looks like in the world, in a larger context, how to do it for other people, the feedback you might receive. But people expect to be bragged to in a bio. And when I see people leave out awards or key speaking gigs, it drives me crazy because people are primed to look at something like that and expect to see all your shiny stuff, and all your best brags. So you need a long bio, and that long bio is everything, and you should update it every couple of months. It's way easier to do that than it is like, you know, we all have these like 2-year-old bios, and it's hard to think back, maybe keep a running document, spend 15 minutes every 2 weeks putting in a win, even if it's as small as like a project or a certain like the largest number of people you've managed. Things like that matter. And then derivative of that is your short bio, which is a paragraph that you create yourself. So that also matters if I were to reach out and ask you for a short bio, because so much of bragging better is it's based on public relations tactics and this idea that you want to be in control of the narrative of your work and of the narrative of your career. If you send me your long bio and I only need a short one, I am going to chomp it down just based on what I think is important, not what you think is important. And if I leave out a key award and I put it in a brochure for a conference I'm putting on, and someone in that audience actually really need a speaker who got that award, then you've lost the opportunity. So that's the short bio. You, again, want to be in control of that. And then the 2-line bio, I believe that should all, you know, be on all your social media platforms and everywhere, byline, what have you. So those 3 things all need to be really consistent. I've written about, and it's in the extra chapter and it's in the book, on what makes a good bio, but that's one thing you can do right now. And something you do tonight is update your email signature. It's not in the headshots piece, but we email 1 million people every day. And one of the key takeaways from Brag Better too is that you want to be able to communicate who you are, what you want, and what you want of someone in 30 seconds. Otherwise, a recruiter, a conference booker, you know, a TV booker will move on to someone who's packaged themselves better and definitely hasn't done as much as you have. So when we're corresponding with people, especially because we're all behind screens, we're in this emergency situation, everyone is in a different place or spot, it's so much easier for me if I'm introduced to someone and I can just click on the link in their email signature that has their personal website and their phone number. Let's say I'm writing an article and I'm like, I'm just going to call them. And they have that phone number and I can get on the phone with them, versus if they don't, I'll move on to someone else. And it's this idea that there are places all around you to showcase your work and give people just a really strong pitch of who you are. And so those are 2 places you can do right now. I'm not sure if you thought you'd get homework out of this, but you did. So
yes. And talk about a headshot.
Headshots, got to keep them updated, got to keep them consistent. It needs to be really clear what you look like, particularly if you want to do more outward facing things. So TV, speaking, et cetera, et cetera. It also just communicates you showing up for yourself and your work in a particular way. A lot of us don't like photos of ourselves. I know that there's some photographers doing social distance headshots, so they're taking pictures of people from 6 feet away, so you have no excuse. But keep that updated, and those should match everywhere. You know, even if your Twitter is full of jokes, the problem is when a hiring manager Googles you, anyone Googles you, it's going to pop up immediately because the search engine optimization on that is so high that they need to know that it's you. And if you want to, lock that down, that's fine. But again, still needs to be consistent. That's what I talk about, bragging better, stating these facts strategically and consistently to move your message forward.
Yeah. I love part 2 being the campaign of you. because we're all familiar with a campaign. What are your tips for bragging better while we're working from home and we're all basically confined to ourselves being in this box here?
It's really hard. And I really feel for people who are the kind of person who are like, if I just need to get in the door and I'll win them over. That sucks because you can't. And so the pillars of bragging better are to be loud, proud, and strategic. Loud is not necessarily the volume of your voice, though it could be. It just means repetition and consistency. Those are the two things that break through and get people to listen to you. Scientifically, the more we hear a message, the more likely we're willing and able to receive it and remember it. Proud, I think, is the hardest one, which is to be proud of the work you've done. It's very easy, especially if you're watching this and, Tiffany and I come from, cut from the same cloth of type A ladies being hard on themselves. That's a hard thing to do. And then the strategic piece is, what are you channeling this for? Otherwise, it's just more noise. But I added this extra pillar in quarantine. It's in the free chapter, which is explicit. I was already telling you that you had to tell people who you are and what you want, but you got to do that so much more because nobody can infer anything right now. You can't pop by your boss's office and say like, hey, I want to, go over how that presentation was. I thought it went really well. Like, can I get some feedback? Or you can't, bump into a coworker and say, oh my God, I loved what you said in that meeting. Like, how can I help your project? So I think that doing this from home, you have to just communicate it even better through a personal website. You have no excuse now. Buying that domain and building it out, writing things out. It's hard. I will say, if I didn't have this book called Brag Better to push, this is not necessarily the time to break through, and don't put that pressure on yourself, especially if you're, trying to get through a certain message. It's about building that foundation, that really strong, unshakable, consistent foundation of your background, so that then in the fall or the spring or the summer, whenever we are able to go back to semi-normal, you're able to share those things, but also you have the skills to understand how to do this online, because this is likely what a lot of the future of work will look like.
Yeah. Are you finding in working with your clients that you're needing to coach them on what's happening behind them, even in all of these video calls? Is there a way to use, like, how is what's behind you right now, Meredith, and what we're seeing right now reflective of you bragging better?
So it's funny. So I have to give a shout out who I think he's watching. I have a brother who is a television producer. So he helped me with my setup to look good. And I have like a ring light in front of me, which I realized like everything is just lighting. Like, I'm like, oh, you don't look bad. You just don't have the right lighting. So, I have my book. I have something from the Women's March from the Amplifier Foundation, a shepherd fairy print. I have my little neon, which is some personality. I have color and, it's sort of fun, but also you get to see, like, you can like look at the little books back in there and my succulents that show some of my personality. But it's hard to do this from all of a sudden we're like in people's houses. And it's like a fun voyeuristic thing, but also difficult in the workplace. And I've done this with clients too, that especially if you're doing TV or they're speaking on something or working on that, I'm like, okay, you need to move that there. And also that book, like, do you want everyone to see that book? And just thinking about also how people are going to infer what's behind you, or if you honestly want to just buy a backdrop and put it behind you. I've seen people do that too. It's a tough thing. It's an oddly intimate experience that sometimes isn't fair to people who aren't set up for it. So with my clients, absolutely, we talk about that, especially if they're doing either on camera or things that will also make people, I know there's someone on Twitter who like rates people's Zoom backgrounds. I think it's like literally called Room Rater. So I'm going for something, dynamic and fun, but also not like so crazy distracting.
Yeah. Right now we're in really uncertain times. There, is record unemployment. There are people who are trying to figure out how to break through when it's really tough. What do you feel like are some concrete skills that we need to have in order to ensure that we're amplifying ourselves in the right way, just in the midst of all of this uncertainty?
Yeah, so obviously I couldn't have predicted that that's what this would come out, among. I've been having a lot of conversations about how job seekers or college graduates can use Brag Better, or at least hopefully get some ideas on how to promote their skill set. Unfortunately, you know, being able to talk about your work as the number of job applicants is so highly competitive is something that is just going to be a skill that is totally unavoidable. Um, it's hard because though we are so far apart from each other in terms of being able to be in rooms, and especially when you're hunting for a job, so much of that, you answer the questions well, but there's always that like X factor with a hiring manager or someone that like clicks. It's so hard to click with people. But one silver lining that I've talked to people about too is, I mean, in terms of thinking about doing interviews for jobs and doing them over Zoom and considering your background, and even if you go into a corner of your apartment just so that there's a blank wall behind you, showing up in the way that you would show up in a regular interview is important. And in some ways, you are also on your own turf, and so you're going to feel more comfortable. It's really easy to be very nervous in a job interview, and it's funny because as much as I wanted to do all the traditional book press and what have you and be at the Strand as I was supposed to be, it's nice to be on my own turf so that I feel a little more comfortable, and then I can be stronger in the way that I assert my work. But as I said, I mean, it's a completely unprecedented time. I believe, particularly for college graduates, in the advice that I've been given, that this generation has dealt with so much uncertainty and is so creative, particularly online, that I am like so not worried about them, because the things they're doing are so incredibly inventive. But yeah, I mean, one of the only things you can do right now is market yourself online, or at least through a personal website or through your social media or what have you. And that makes it hard and so much more important to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I do get concerned about, and maybe it's with younger people, and maybe it's because I have a daughter as well, maybe it's just the Instagram world, but part of the book that really resonated with me was chapter 13, when you talked about how to deal with being out there, and just the psychology of being out there. And there's this section where you talk about how perfect is boring. Perfect is boring. And I loved this because I think a lot of us feel a lot of pressure to present as perfect, to be perfect. But can you talk about why perfect is boring?
Absolutely. So when I talk about bragging better and showcasing your work, it's not a robotic thing. I mean, the key components of a great brag, and this is in the book, or checklist, is pride, being proud in your work, gratitude, which is a great thing to espouse, and this humility, you can still have it and brag better. Presentation, considering the audience, but also the medium, and then showmanship, which is your unique flair. And that's what makes it fun. And that's what makes you interesting. I used the case of a particular online influencer who decided to be very middle of the road, and was someone who's very interested in art and varying social issues and really interesting. And as she grew, as she got more attention, she actually decided instead to just play it safe, to always post things that would appease the most number of people, that didn't have strong opinions. But I knew she had them. And I knew she was more interesting than what she was putting out into the world. And I watched her plateau. And in recent current events, I've been happy to see, particularly with Black Lives Matter, that she has come back out to realize that that's not the way to be. And I'm actually watching her audience grow. But the point is being out there is hard. It's an out there, whether that's just putting yourself out there with your coworkers or putting yourself out there on stage is an act of vulnerability. It's really scary. It's very easy to take shots at someone who has decided to put herself out there. I've been called everything. And I'm obviously arguing that it's a net positive. But we're in this weird situation where, particularly with certain social media, it's really easy to literally put a filter on life and only want to show certain things. And that's not really how humans connect. I mean, I'm obviously telling you to be really strategic, and I'm telling you to package yourself and pitch yourself, but I'm also telling you to sort of like give people a little peek into who you really are, because that's what sticks. And I use the example of, especially with Fine Point, my company and my personal website, for a long time was really what I just thought the idea of a business person's site should be, and it lacked personality, and because I thought people wouldn't take me seriously. And if anything, it was just actually doing me a disservice, because it just was very standard, very like, this is business type thing. And once I got more comfortable with showcasing my personality in my business, and I think you can talk about this is certainly true to your business and to the crew, that's how people actually connect with you. But it's very easy to get caught up in feeling like everyone's lives are perfect. And it's a really interesting time because people really can't pretend that right now. Like they really can't, because everything is so out of whack. That's been interesting to watch people who do spend their time and or have professions of making their life look perfect reckon with what's happening.
Yeah, for certain. We are starting to get questions, so I'm going to yield the floor a little bit to the folks who are watching. One of the questions that we have is a reference to Black Lives Matter, because you mentioned Black Lives Matter. Do you feel comfortable talking about how people of color can use your book?
Absolutely. So, one, bragging better is a team sport. And I believe that if you are someone people listen to, white people in general, or white men, but also just white people in general, having a job to elevate the voices of others. And this just goes for anyone who has the privilege of being listened to. And I talk about how our narrow definitions of experts and voice and who we think we should give our time and attention to in recent weeks has been challenged in a very important way, and people are understanding, whether it's Lovey Ajayi, who's in the book, did the whole Share the Mic campaign, where she had 50 very influential, famous white women give over their platforms to 50 interesting, wonderful Black women to share stories so that they could reach a different audience and that people could know who they were. I am very aware, particularly when training people, that as a white person, I don't have certain perspective. I have experienced sexism in my career, but I don't have to deal with the race element. And so instead of trying to write about that myself, which I went back and forth about, I realized it just wasn't my thing to talk about, and I should yield the floor to 20 really amazing, interesting, thoughtful voices that pepper this book, many of whom are Black women that talk about being in the C-suite, being in positions of power, being in certain spaces where they are breaking barriers, but also just should be listened to. Someone like a Kimberly Drew, who just has a new book out called What I Know About Art, traversing places like the Met as a Black woman, giving that advice is what I want. But also, it is your job, if you're someone that we listen to at all, to share that. And there's enough room on the stage for everyone. And that's one thing that, Tiffany, you're also really, really wonderful at, is bragging better with and for and in service of others. And sometimes not bragging at all is important.
Yeah, for sure. I shall brag about the fact that I am mature enough to need this in order to see the chat questions, which include, you might have answered it already. Someone wanted to know, what was your favorite interview for the book?
Oh boy. So Dream Hampton, who was the executive producer of Surviving R. Kelly, who talks about, she has so many crazy stories. She was the first person to ever write about Biggie, and in the New York music scene. Just like her stories are crazy, just absolutely crazy. And that she had gotten into, you know, this fight over, there was like a, you know, something with sexual assault and Dr. Dre, like, oh, she has these crazy, I can't wait for her to write a book whenever she does do that. So that was a pretty wild interview, I will say. And I have some in the book about what it was like to just be thrust into the spotlight with Surviving R. Kelly, but also tackling something really important and really controversial, though it shouldn't have been, and what that blowback looked like, and sitting there and being doxxed and having her personal information exposed, and threats of violence. So that was really, really interesting. Cindy Gallup, who is
Everything. She's everything.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to sum her up. Cindy Gallup, she has a whole, so I have interviews in here. What I need to do is take all the audio from interviews and make them into a podcast. But Cindy has a whole section on bullshitting like a man. Cindy is a former ad executive, the founder. She's in sex tech. She started something called Make Love Not Porn. She's a prolific speaker. And she talks just so much about women breaking barriers when it comes to money and sex and technology and VC. So that was obviously really fun. That was just a really fun one. You know, I geeked out talking to like a Gia Tolentino from a writer point of view. And it's interesting, you know, she's someone who's so incredibly online and everyone loves her and adores her, but she talked about really only really caring about how people who she loved, like she really only cares about what people she really cares about think of her versus deferring to the entire internet.
Yeah. Okay, we have more questions, so we have to like get through these.
Okay.
Okay, this is a very practical, legit question.
Okay.
I work in an office on a team of 4 other people. We all work collaboratively on projects, but I find I often get less credit than my coworkers. They're louder when explaining our work. How can I make my boss more aware of my contributions?
Okay, so 2 things. 1, I have been making scripts for people and talking about this in a lot of interviews, particularly when we're at home. You can't drop by your boss's office and say, hey, I want to highlight something I did, blah, blah, blah. Say to your boss, you know, can we reserve, so we have the love languages. I didn't include this in the book because I think I came up with it too late. But love languages is basically like you show love how you want to receive love. I think they're bragging languages so that, you know, people can retain information how they want to be bragged to, whether that is in a conversation, one-on-one, whether it's in a phone call, whether that's in a report. Like, let's say your boss really loves reports. So you're going to write that person, you know, are you going to call them on the phone? They're not going to retain that and be able to reward you in that way. So first, I would say with your boss, especially in a time like this, I would shoot him or her a message and say, how can I best communicate my wins to you? That saves them time and work. And again, this idea of being really explicit. But again, bragging better is a team sport. And I talk about this in varying forms in the book, and I've advised people to do it in a lot of different ways. Enlist one of your coworkers to help you. You know, office politics are significant, but if there's one of your coworkers or your project, you know, members that you're close to, say, hey, you know, I have trouble talking about some of the stuff I've done. Would you mind if we went into the next meeting with a little bit of strategy and you teed this up for me and I teed this up for you? Like, how can I help highlight your work? I've done that with friends. I've done that with colleagues, people that we're pitching projects on together when we're on panels. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask this to make you look good, and you ask me this to make me look good. You can enlist other people. It's not a solo thing. And you can let them in on it in a way that doesn't say, like, you know, don't take me seriously. It says, like, you know, I'm telling you I'm working on something and I'm asking for your help. And can we do this together?
Absolutely. And Meredith, you do this so well, Meredith, which is being generous with the ask, such that I always feel like, yes, Meredith is really here rooting for me, even though she needs something. So there is a graciousness by which you can ask. Someone else is asking about the workplace. It's similar, but it's actually a little bit of a different question, and I think it's important. During this pandemic, my workload has increased considerably. My boss has recently let more staff go, and my work has further increased. because everyone is working remotely. No one other than my immediate supervisor knows how much I'm doing. So other supervisors will try to give me more work. How do I let people know I'm overwhelmed without selling myself short?
So particularly, and I'm not saying this person is necessarily identifies as a woman, but we all want to take on everything and like just do it all and like not let anyone know we need help. And it's so funny because every single woman that has ever worked for me, I've had to say the same thing, which is, I don't care if you can't do it. I just need you to tell me so that I can do it or someone else can do it. Which I think in this case is a matter of communication. But, and I talk to people about this too, they're like, well, I don't want to seem weak. I don't want to seem like I can't handle things. So I think talking with your direct boss first and saying, I have so much on, because again, people can't walk by your desk and see a pile of, I mean, I don't think people have piles of paper anymore, but they can't see a pile, you know, proverbial piles of paper, and see how underwater you are. They can't see you working, you know, coming in first and leaving last. So again, it's a matter of communicating how much you have on your plate. You could frame it as, you know, I want to take on these other things, but I can't. And so what do you suggest I say to these people? Or how do you suggest I approach this workload? Or it's really hard right now. I've been thinking of you know, people are always in my DMs, particularly young women, asking about how to ask for raises. And there was one that I was coaching on asking for a raise right before the pandemic hit. And that's really messy right now. A lot of people are doing a lot more than they normally would just because of budget cuts and difficulties with staffing. But I would just make it really clear of what you're able to do and also what you want to do of that. And you can say, I want to take on these projects, you know, but I just don't have the capacity to do it. So how can we figure this out together? There's always a spin way to like make it, you know, you don't have to say I'm underwater, help, I'm overwhelmed. You could say, you know, I want to do these other things, but I have way too much on my plate. Like, how are we going to make sure that I get the things I need to get done, and then figure out the rest of it?
Yeah. Somebody else is asking, what was the hardest part of writing this book?
Just actually fucking writing it.
Just doing it. Okay.
Well, no, hold on. So I will answer that different. No, so like writing up, it's just like the doing it is the actual hardest part. It was all hard. It was all hard. Publishing is a lot of hurry up and wait. So, you know, you wait forever to get someone to look at your concept and you're like, oh my God, they're going to look at it. And then they're like, we're going to think about it. And then like, we want it right now, write it tomorrow. So I think the like pacing is hard and the timing is hard. That was hard.
Yeah. Getting feedback from my editor was definitely the hardest part.
Oh yeah, that too. I was like, you can't touch my art. Like, what are you?
Like, what? What do you mean?
I was like, well, okay, you are making it better. How dare you? But also okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing their job. How did you teach yourself to be confident when you hadn't written your book yet?
No.
I'm interested in the answer to this question because I feel like Meredith Fineman just came out confident. Like she was just confident, and the woman who gave birth to her just picked her up and was like, here she is, confident.
Yeah. Well, I do have a confident mom, I will say. It's a lot of faking it in my case. It comes and goes. It comes and goes. I mean, listen, in a lot of ways, I've worked myself into a corner by writing a book called Brag Better. And I'm tired and I'm burnt. And I know that I also have to show up and be confident about it because I got to sell this thing. But it's hard. It's hard. And I think it's taken a long time, and it's a product of age and caring less what people think, and feeling like I have people that care about me. But that's a constant struggle for everyone. Like some of, you know, when I work with and coach these household names, I'm always amazed and distraught over how they feel about themselves and how they cannot talk about their work, which again is like brag better. I'm trying to cut this off like I'm trying to nip it in the bud versus let it get up to the C-suite, and these feelings. But I think that's hard for everyone. And I work on it. So I guess just I try, and I work on it. It's not a natural thing. This is a lot of time and effort.
Okay. This is a question that made me smile. Someone says, I think you have one white male interview, David Rubenstein. Why him? And what useful thing did he have to say? Which I thought was hilarious, as if like a white man doesn't have anything useful to say, but
Well,
I'll leave my commentary out.
I kept waiting for someone to be like, why is there only one man in the book? And I couldn't wait to be like, it's a pipeline problem. So, which is like a joke if you are in VC or if you're fundraising or whatever, that they always say they just like can't find like women founders or like founders of color because it's just like clearly a pipeline problem, which it's not. You're just not looking hard enough.
If you didn't just laugh of the joke and you had to like get Meredith's explanation of the joke, then you might be part of the problem. No, just kidding.
No, it's a saying something's a pipeline problem is a well-known excuse for not doing the work.
That's right.
David is an incredible business person and philanthropist and a big picture thinker. So, you know, he's the co-founder of Carlyle Group. He has made more money than most people. He is also a, you know, white man. So he's operating at the other end of the spectrum of people I'm talking to and things we're thinking about. Like when I asked him if he ever felt like there was a time he couldn't use his voice, to him that was, you know, there wasn't one. And he is someone who knows a lot about running a business and leadership and persuasion. And so he has a brag breakdown, which is a bigger interview on persuasion, how to get people to listen to you, because the business that he's built is extremely, extremely significant. And I wanted to speak to someone who was at the pinnacle of power and influence, and see what they thought of this concept and how it has helped them. Particularly, and then also how he has used his voice when it comes to philanthropy and giving back. And it's just like it was a complete 180 from honestly the rest of the interviews that I did. I couldn't find a lot of men that I wanted to talk to, but he was one of them, just in terms of like being a titan of industry, that like I felt like he does not dole out advice very often. And I, you know, he sits in his office and works hard and is in a huge position of power. So if we can learn things from him, and maybe use some of those feelings, that people should hear about them. But it is a funny contrast to the rest of it.
Someone asked a question that I don't know fully the answer to. So I was like, oh, I am interested in what Meredith has to say about this. So, and there may be some legal implications here. I plan weddings as part of my job, doing private rentals. I would like to do it independently. Can I include examples of those weddings on my website? While I produced them, they fall under the umbrella of the company that I had worked for or I work for. Is it a conflict? I have ideas for small social distancing elopement, so the timing isn't terrible. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's for sure legal. I don't know. You got to check your contracts, and talk to those people, because even if, you know, that's like, I've been in situations like that where everyone has, where they want to showcase something they've done, and you have to be careful because the law exists. And especially with what you can say, like, this is it's interesting. Nobody's ever asked a question like this. I mean, ever. It's been 2 weeks since I put this book out. It feels like a lifetime, but you want to brag about your work, but you got to be careful that when you do, you're not screwing yourself. So check your contracts, talk to those people, and I don't know. It totally would depend on what those contracts look like and what the people you did it under want you to do.
Yeah. We've got a question from a recent grad. I know that you care about recent grads, who's trying to get a job. They say, I'm really proud of my GPA. How do I put that out there to employers without seeming unsavory?
I mean, sorry, this is not directed directly at you, recent grad. So I did a live earlier today where I was talking to a bunch of comedians, and that was really fun. And they were like, well, I've been on the Late Show, but I'm afraid of saying that. I'm like, well, have you not done it? And they're like, no, I did it. I was like, okay, so it's not a lie. So like, you should say it. State it. It's a fact. Bragging is facts. State it. If you haven't done it, it's a lie. I mean, that's different. But you've done that. And one thing I talk to grads about is people are often nervous when they're going into the workplace and they're like, well, I don't have that much to brag about because I just graduated from college. And you need to work with what you've got. And I think that there are a lot of leadership examples or GPA examples or what have you that do demonstrate how you are primed for the workplace. And your GPA is the factiest of facts. Like, it's a number. Just like stick it on your resume. The unsavory part, like, I hope it's, I mean, I don't know, GPAs are 4.0, so like, it's like, if it's a 4.0, that's great. Like, people want to see that, and certain companies value that stuff over others. I mean, some of those consulting firms want to see your SAT scores, so can't hurt.
I think it's awesome. I always get a kick out of women who tell me that they went to school in Boston.
Yeah, that
which is basically their way of saying I went to Harvard, but they don't want to say that they went to Harvard.
Well, then I said that to someone. Someone did that recently, and I was like, "Are you just trying to tell me you went to Harvard?" And they're like, "No, I went to Tufts." And I was like, "Okay."
Okay. Okay. Last question, because we're already a minute over. What's your next project?
So rude to ask to someone who just wrote a book, but
it's like, when are you going to have another kid? And you just pushed baby out.
I know, but I've been writing books for 3 years. I collaborated on a book before this one. So I want to write Brag Better with Money. I'd like to do a Brag Better workbook. Some e-learning is in the pipeline. A lot of this stuff, I want people to be able to, further their bragging education. So those 3 things are coming after I take a vacation.
There you go. There you go. Meredith, I love you. I love your book, Brag Better. We're in this moment where it's not just about us, it's about everyone. And I love that you position bragging as not just about the individual, but about the collective. And that speaking up for yourself is really also about speaking up for others and championing others. And I can't think of a better champion for women and for those of us who might feel like we are afraid to speak up, we're afraid to brag, lean into bragging better. Thank you so much for all of us for joining tonight. Meredith, do you have any last words, final words for us?
Please buy Brag Better.
Yes, it's in the chat. It's in the chat. There's a link there that you can use.
There's a link in the chat. You can learn everything about me at meredithfineman.com. You can get that extra chapter at brag-better.com. Your accomplishments are worth talking about, and you just got to state those facts so that people can give you what you want, because nobody knows what you've done until you tell them, especially now, because we are all in our own heads and all in our own worlds, and it's a really hard time, period. So I'm asking you to do something that's hard in an even harder time, but there's always a place to begin. And yes, this is a team sport. You need to do this for others, and you can ask others to do it for you, because it's just more fun that way. It would have been very easy for me to look at Tiffany and say, oh, we're in competition, versus make her my friend. So
thank you for being my friend, Meredith.
Thank you
for being on my team.
Of course.
Well, thank you both so much for a wonderful conversation. I have to buy your book. I will be ordering it myself from the Strand. There was so much information. Yeah, but thank you everyone for coming, and have a great night.
Thank you so much for having me.